Hi, I'm Joe Welinske, and I'm going to be talking about UX writing today with Torrey Podmajersky. Hi, Torrey. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Hi, Joe.
Well, we're about, I don't know, I guess the time we're doing this around 7 weeks into our Washington State's uh, lockdown. So how's that going for you?
It is actually going better than expected. I have it a lot easier than my colleagues who have small kids at home, and it's just me and my husband at home and some cats who are very happy to have us. Google actually sent us home a couple weeks before the state made it mandatory. So it's been, I think this is week 10 for me.
Oh, all right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, my organization, Blink, has been remote for almost 2 months now, so jumping right into that. And but the business, fortunately for us, is still going strong in the research and design consultancy area. So
Yeah. I feel like those of us who can work from home and can keep doing our jobs, it's very different, and some things are a lot more difficult, but we're so lucky to have that flexibility and employers that can do that. And frankly, a civic infrastructure that lets us have internet speeds that make it possible and all of that. Like, we've got a lot going for us. And I'm going to make my pitch for, like, oh my God, thank you, all the workers who are out in the world making all this possible. Thank you, thank you.
yeah, no, you're right. You were definitely definitely in a privileged position about that. I have you have to rely on caregivers right now. I have both my parents are in a nursing home. It's under lockdown, and so there haven't been any outside visitors there for like 2 months now.
Wow.
And it's just it's going to be an odd time to reflect on in history.
Yeah. Well, wishing your parents well.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to talk about was things going on with you and UX writing. And so I don't know, maybe just to start would be to talk about what you're up to right now.
Yeah, well, what I'm up to right now is doing the very fundamentals of UX writing. Uh, and it's funny how the crisis put into perspective how critical it is to have the words right. There were, and there've been globally different efforts where suddenly infrastructure is being used a lot harder, and than ever, or electronic infrastructure is being used a lot harder. Um, and within the Alphabet group of companies that Google is part of, I had an opportunity to work with the Verily company on their COVID-19 website response, and just working on the very basics there of what should the strings be, and then 2 steps back from that, like, what is the purpose? How do we want people to feel? How do we need them to behave? And that's from people going to testing sites and what happens at those physical testing sites with the UX writing on physical signs being held up by volunteers and staff, to the online parts of how do people know that how do they know what the right thing to do is, and how do they move themselves through the process to be screened for it, and stuff like that. And that's all work I was able to do sort of on loan to Verily from Google while keeping projects going in my team.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask about that, if if it directly aligned with other things you're working on, or in sort of an ad hoc volunteerism effort.
Totally ad hoc volunteerism within the suite of companies. Um, so there's work, and I apologize for my voice. It is allergy season here in Seattle, as you know, and I'm allergic to all of it. So yay.
You got that going.
The inside Google, I've been working in the Google Cloud organization, which has a lot of things going on with the COVID response in terms of site reliability and keeping functions going as people more and more rely on things like shared Google documents and Meet and Hangouts and the various infrastructure there. I work on the Google Cloud Platform side, where I've been working on some lower level things I can't say a whole lot about, but articulating some of the next phases of projects and getting in with a content perspective to say, what should we call those things, and how should we talk about them, and where do they fit into the overall narrative of how people will use this product?
Well, you've certainly made UX writing an important part of your career, but I mean, just stepping back a little bit, how'd you find your way into this area? Because that particular label is relatively new. I mean, I think you helped to promote that through the book that you wrote that we can talk about a little bit later. But I mean, kind of what was your path finding your way into what you're doing now?
I got into it about 10 years ago, and especially 10 years ago, there were no normal paths into UX writing. And I don't think that we can say that there is a normal path into it right now. It is not something that there's been enough education about. There's not a degree in it. There's not any of that kind of thing that you would get for, say, interaction design or those things. But 10 years ago, I was an internal communications specialist at a division inside Microsoft. So I worked in the business management office and worked on making sure that people within this 1,200 person division were getting good information about the different purposes of like what we were doing, what the products were, what the timelines were, what the overall messages should be. And after a while, that was working and people knew what we were doing. And it's not like it changes that frequently. And it was time for that team to reorganize. And my manager at the time said, "What are you doing working behind the scenes? You should go work on product." I thought, well, what does that mean? And what could I do? I had come from a career in teaching, and I was teaching high school and creating curriculum for high school science. And then had made the transition into communication. And then I was going, oh, well, what's next? And I had a million conversations, I'm being hyperbolic there, about different careers and different ways I could use my particular skills and interests. And then I talked to the writing manager at Xbox, and he said, I have a problem. I can't hire for this role that I need to happen. I need people writing the words that are on the screens so that when a 9-year-old unpacks an Xbox on Christmas morning, they can plug it in and get it all set up themselves without having to wake up mom and dad. And I thought, that is a neat problem. And he told me actually that he had seen my writing samples and he said, you have explained complex abstract concepts so that teenagers can get it. I think you can do this and we'll train you. And I joined this wonderful small team of UX writers. And then we were called content developers, I think. And I know that Microsoft has updated its titles a few times too. And UX was just starting to be used in 2010 as sort of the name of what design was. And some people didn't like it and some people did like it, and it was all a mess. So here's where we are 10 years later as UX writers. Whether you call us content designers or content developers or copywriters or UX copywriters or any number of things, we are writing the words in the experiences so that people know where to go forward. And that's whether it's a physical experience like the signs being held up coronavirus testing sites, or the strings and buttons and titles and labels in an electronic experience.
Well, a couple of things that you mentioned in there, I think we're really pivotal in that it sounded like there were at least a couple of people, one that suggested you kind of move forward or more visible, and then in the Xbox opportunity to get directly involved in the user interface area, and that you embrace that. And I mean, I've been writing in the technology area since a long time, 1985 or something like that. But as the opportunities became available around the time that you were talking about, say 2005 to 2010, unfortunately, I think a lot of people that had been from traditional technical writing backgrounds weren't like sure about how to move into that. Maybe you didn't have that same launching ramp for that, and you never were able to make that leap. And so I think that you were in a great position to embrace that and have those opportunities.
Yeah, I was in a very fortunate space, and I like that I'm glad you pointed out that it's really these people who saw this, because I want to emphasize, it's not that I saw that this was a clear path forward that I could invent on my own, like a hero walking out into the wilderness for a quest. No, I had people who had different perspectives and different vantage points to view from, who said, we needed a different thing, and we think you can do this because of these reasons. And I said, okay, and then I learned a lot. And what's funny, you mentioned about technical writing versus UX writing. It is, I've heard from other technical writers that still, like, it can be hard to make that transition. And I think that there's a couple of misconceptions at play when I talk to people about technical writing versus UX writing. Is this a good time to talk about that? Because
no, jump in, because I have my whole own set of thoughts about that too.
Yeah, so here's what I think about it right now, and this has been growing over time, is that technical writers, and so the documents that technical writers create in general are intended to have two purposes. One is to help a user of an experience or a developer for an experience deeply understand what's going on, so that they can either troubleshoot a problem or create a new experience based on what's already been done. The other purpose of it is for essentially regulation. Like, we need to, for an airplane, document all of the parts and all of the wires and all of the systems and where they go and how they work, so that if a forensic analysis needed to be done, there is some set of instruction, right? Like, so that's one example. But there's those two different purposes are kind of at odds with each other, because the kind of information you write down for future potential angry legislatures are a very different set of things you write down for helping the person fix the problem they're having right now in the moment. So the kind of technical writing that focuses on that user and helping them in the moment, I think that the people who've been honing that skill have an easier time transitioning to UX writing, because you are even more immediately helping the person move forward. So it's sort of stripping out most of the information and just saying, like, okay, right now do this. Okay, right now, here, you can go here. So there's a spectrum there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, unfortunately, a lot of technical writing gets trapped in an environment where, even if they want to embrace user-centered design of their content, the opportunities aren't provided for that. And it's extremely unfortunate because I mean, that carries over into that area as well. I mean, I tell my students at the University of Washington, you know, if you're writing things and nobody is consuming that, there's a lot of waste of time going on. And, you know, volumes of content isn't the solution. Testing of your documentation is a critical area that unfortunately resources aren't provided for. And so I think that, you know, the UX, if the idea of the label of UX writer, I think to me is emblematic of just the idea that your content development within the user interface is determined to be part of that user experience. And so to me, that's empowering and very progressive.
Yeah, it is very empowering. And I will say that UX writers also have a hard time, much like UX designers still in some areas, have a hard time getting involved with the critical decisions, getting involved with like, hey, no, this is going to be used. This will matter in the metrics we're trying to drive here, whether it's usage, whether it's sentiment, whether it's, you know, some sort of engagement or sharing or any of the metrics. Having high quality content in the UX and in the help content, whether that's whether it's viewed as technical content or technical writing or just, oh, well, we just need some help docs, right? Or an FAQ. If we haven't designed that to be useful, to be in the voice of our product, to be, you know, if we haven't designed it with as much attention to that as we do to the rest of our UX, we're missing the boat. And we're missing out on real dollars and real views and real, all of the things that our companies care about.
Yeah, well, and in order to do that, it's to build up an identifiable, if not a profession, a discipline within the broader practice of user experience. And part of that is that your community is developing your best practices about what it means to be a good UX writer. And so then books like the one that you wrote, I think are instrumental in helping to start to set that framework up. And I know in your book, I believe you kind of built it on your experiences of getting into that area. Maybe you talk a little bit about what your thoughts were into starting to develop that book a few years ago.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The whole purpose, and I think actually you've nailed it, the whole purpose of writing the book was, holy mackerel, we need to be treating this as a discipline that we can build upon. And we need to not be separate UX writers or even UX writing teams independently doing the research and building best practices and reinventing things all the time. We need to be able to share that information with each other. We need to be able to build each other up and let people start from a common starting place or even uncommon starting places, but to have it be understood. And we need that for managers writing their first job description to hire their first UX writer, to people getting their first job and saying like, okay, what have I promised to do? And we need it for people who are moving on in their career like me and like, well, what's my next step? Is this a writing discipline? Is this a UX discipline? Is this an engineering discipline? Because writers have spanned that breadth in the past. So what I went to a conference, I went to Confab, I want to say 2018. Everything has really moved very fast. I can't believe that it's only 2020 still, since I've clearly been working from home for a few years at this point. That was sarcasm, by the way. And so I got home from this conference where I had been around the greatest concentration of product writers I had ever been around before, which was like 40 at a conference of 700 people. So these 40 people, and some of us met up at one of the lunch tables, and I was hearing people express some of the same questions and concerns and problems they were trying to solve that I had solved 6, 7, 8 years before, working with a team and doing research. And I was going, oh my goodness, why are we reinventing this? Like, you guys, there's an answer to that problem. Skip it and move on. But nobody's been writing these down yet. So I pitched the book when I got back from that conference and got rejected, and then pitched it again. And O'Reilly picked it up. And I wrote the book, and it's out there. So,
I mean, I know how hard it is to actually get through that process. Yeah, that's it.
Happen to have it on my, shelf behind me up here. Yep.
There you go. Well, yeah, I think a lot of people have enjoyed the content that you put in there. You mentioned it. You do work at Google, and I mean, just anecdotally, I would say that a lot of the thought leadership I see in Medium articles and other things come out, and job descriptions about UX writing seem to have a Google employer label attached to that. So obviously your organization is kind of a nexus for that. But I mean, internally, are there any things that have developed that are building that as a unique practice or discipline within UX?
Yeah, we definitely have connections among UX writers. We're still, Google will always be, I hope, an engineering-led company. So I think that there's more engineers than any other role at Google. That's actually, don't quote me on that because I don't actually have those numbers, but it certainly feels that way. Quote me on the feeling. And the UX writers, we reach out to each other. We have, group chat rooms. We have that sort of thing. And we also are working to advance our own skills and understanding of the discipline and sharing research when we do it to advance. So it is a good place to be for developing.
Do you tend to embed within a particular product group within the organization, or do you move around to provide assistance where it's needed?
So everybody, I would say that every role is a little bit unique at Google, and that's something that Google is pretty famous for. But in general, UX writers are attached to groups of various sizes, and the model we prefer to use in most cases is the sort of 3-in-a-box model with PM, UX, and engineering. And writers are a key part of the UX. Like, there's no parts of any of our UX that don't use words. So establishing what the language should be, what the voice should be, what goals we're trying to solve, or what problems we're trying to solve, or opportunities to meet, is part of the UX role, and we partner within that.
Well, I mean, we could get a little bit wonky and into the weeds a little bit. Are there any tough challenges that you're trying to deal with now? Some new problems that you've encountered that you're trying to solve as a UX writer?
Oh, there's most of them I can't talk about right now, unfortunately. Most of my right now work is, I'll tell you in a few years.
All right. And who knows, a few years from now, we might still be doing this remote gig. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me for a little bit about this, and I look forward to, continuing to work with you as we move forward.
Yeah, me too, Joe. Thanks for setting this up.
All right. Thanks a lot, Torrey. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.